Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Paul Bridges, National Chair of Communities in Bloom. Happy National Tree Day if you're here in Canada, and hopefully everyone else is having a wonderful day abroad. I'd like to welcome you to our 2020 Virtual Symposium kickoff webinar of our 2020 Communities in Bloom Special Edition program. We'd like to thank all of our Communities in Bloom sponsors and partners at this time for their contributions towards our 2020 Special Edition. Their support and the support of our registered communities is truly appreciated. Today's webinar is sponsored by our major national sponsor, Scott's, and I'd like to thank you so much to Scott's for their support of our program this year. And with that, I'd like to welcome Karen Stephenson of Scott's, the Director of Regulatory Affairs and Stakeholder Relations, to the webinar today. Karen, thanks so much for joining us and helping out with this year's program.
Thanks, Paul, for having me today, and it's wonderful to be back and taking part in Communities in Bloom's 2020 virtual symposium on behalf of Scott's. I hope everyone's been keeping well. For decades, Scott's Canada has been helping Canadians and communities grow with products and programs that support green spaces and gardens. It's been a privilege to play at least a small part in building healthy communities through our partnership with Communities in Bloom. And during this unprecedented time, Scott's Canada would like to thank all of your communities and your volunteers for the hard work that you've been doing every day during COVID-19. We wish all of your families and social circles good health and hope that everybody is staying safe. Together, we will all get through this challenging time. So today I'd like to welcome our keynote speaker, Frankie Flowers, who will be providing us with advice and answering your questions about Frankie's finds of amazing annuals. And Frank Ferragini, also known as Frankie Flowers, is one of Canada's most trusted and popular garden experts and weathermen. Please feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A feature throughout the presentation, and we will do our best to address them all. You can find the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. If it's disappeared, you may just need to hover over your mouse around the bottom of your Zoom screen to have it pop up again. And if you would like to see more of Frankie after this presentation, Scott's Canada invites you to check out his many videos on scotts.ca and miraclegrow.ca. So Frank, we look forward to your presentation today. Over to you.
Thanks, Darren, and thanks and good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, I should be saying. I work on a morning show, so it's always where I'm saying good morning to everybody. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day, no matter whether you are across the country. This morning in the city of Toronto, what we were watching is eyes over towards Nova Scotia. We're hoping with Hurricane Teddy, post-tropical storm Hurricane Teddy, that you're doing well there. If you're wondering where I am this afternoon, well, I'm actually in my family greenhouse. And if you wonder what's behind me right here, there's Christmas right behind you. What's in terms of Christmas is the poinsettia crop that's growing there. But what I really want to speak to you today a little bit about is something that I've grown up around, because my family is indeed an annual grower. So each and every year, I take a look at some of the best varieties of annuals, and I really have a soft spot for annuals, not only because I've worked with them all my life, but also I really feel that they give you that sizzle when it comes to your yard overall. So let's take a look at what we got going on in terms of your amazing annuals. We'll go right there, and we're gonna just start this slideshow off for you. I gotta get used to doing all this different fancy stuff here as well. Okay, there you guys go. So here's a look at some of the amazing annuals, which we would call some of my favorites when it comes to overall. First off, let's talk a little bit about annuals. Annuals themselves, I always say, are that flame of color in the garden. During the summer and growing season, they're that one constant that will always give you color, as long as they're deadheaded, and there are better varieties that are out there. When it comes to a good annual, for me, what I'm looking for has either a long bloom period, or it has really great garden interest. So either its foliage looks fantastic, and then the other is disease and insect resistant. And really those annuals are great in containers. And I go all over looking at different annual plantings. Here's some pictures that I had from Epcot, the Epcot Flower and Garden Show that happens each and every year at Disney. Some of the best annual plantings I've ever seen are there. And indeed, they have one of the biggest budgets out there in the world. And if you're wondering, how do they plant so many annuals in such a short period of time? Because a lot of the times they'll do these transitions just overnight. How they do that is that all the annuals that are grown in ellie pots. And by being grown in ellie pots, in a bigger ellie pot, a 4-inch ellie pot, what they're doing is being able not to take that pot off. They're able to plant it right away. And they're also able to reduce waste. If you ever want to find more about what goes on at Disney World specifically, check out Eric Darden. Eric Darden is the head of horticulture that's there. But, you know, we don't have to go far to take a look at great annual plantings. This is a picture just taken a few years ago in a community not far from where I am. I'm in Bradford, Ontario. The community where I was born is Newmarket, Ontario. And this is some of the plantings that happens at Newmarket, Ontario. And this is just over by Fairy Lake. And this is really what adds to community. When you think about the love and the care of a community, plants say it best, and annuals in a downtown setting, in settings that are even in commercial settings, are ones that kind of give you that punch, that color, that vibrancy, and make us all say, wow, garden season is indeed here. You know, but it's not just annuals. We have to say that we got to give a shout out to flowering shrubs and perennials as well. But we can see even in this little array of plantings where we have a beautiful PG hydrangea in the center, we have some of the rudbeckia that's planted there as well, which is your black-eyed Susans. But in front, you have your nice wave petunias there that are in blue. So that constant sizzle that you're going to have in the bottom right corner will be those petunias. As this garden transitions throughout the season with the perennials, I always tell people to add that flame of color. Now, when it comes to trials, there are trials right across the country. There's trials right across the world. There's trials in Chicago. There's trials, of course, the PAC trials, which happen down into California in early April. But this is a trial that's not done too far from me. It's about a couple-hour drive. This is in Simcoe, Ontario. This is Mel Sawoya's trial, which is focused greenhouse management. And you can see all the different annual varieties that are put out there, basically in the middle of a field. And we got to see how they're going to do in terms of vibrancy. And so each and every year, I go to take a look at some of the varieties, and each and every year is different. This year, I was really looking towards what we're going to be heat tolerant, because here in Ontario, we had the record-breaking summer that we had in terms of temperatures. As a matter of fact, the city of Toronto in the summer saw 35 days of 30-degree weather, 30 degrees Celsius weather. That's unbelievable, record-breaking. So how did the plants, how did the annuals hold up? Well, you know, annuals in my own backyard, I got to give a little shout out to the left there. That's my backyard where you can see I'm a lover of annuals. And to the right there is, you can see some of the plugs that are grown. But let's talk about some of the annuals that I think are the best ones that you can be putting in either your community or even in your backyard. Whopper begonia. Whopper begonia is a fantastic begonia with a very large flower, but not only that, it's its foliage. It's dark colored foliage with a nice glossy leaf that does fantastic. This does well in full sun settings and also even into some partial light. This is an improvement over what I would say dragon wings begonia. Dragon wings begonia is the ugly duckling, but it's like that ugly swan. You know how the swan during the growing season goes from something that's kind of ugly to something that's beautiful? Well, dragon wings begonia in the early season, even as a greenhouse grower, they're hard to sell because early in the season, they're ugly. But by the end of the season, this drought-tolerant flowering annual that does well, and if you go right now and drive around some of the communities, and even if you drive around some of the commercial settings where there's planting, I guarantee you, you will see wonderful whopper and also wonderful dragon wings begonia. And the reason, because they survive with low maintenance and also with minimal watering. These guys here may look kind of ugly in the early spring, but they do indeed survive. If you're looking for something that can have you made in the shade, and you're looking for something that's foliage, I always say that Coleus is the variety to go to. Coleus is a fantastic foliage, and Concoleus is one of the better varieties that are out there. And if you're wondering why it's called Concoleus Jr., Concoleus Jr. is an improvement over the original Concoleus. The reason being, the original Concoleus would grow too big, too fast, so when it was being transported from greenhouses to garden centers and then to home gardens or even to commercial settings, it was breaking. So the transport, but this guy here in shade It comes in an array of different foliage colors. We'll have you made in the shade, and it is unbelievable. I hope you guys are seeing me there all right, because just said my internet connection is unstable. I'm in Bradford. I'm in farmland. We don't have the best internet at times, but there we go. So let's talk a little bit about a great performing coleus for full sun. And when it comes to full sun, one of the greatest performing coleus is Dragonheart. Dragonheart is a brand new variety that's grown by cutting. So a cutting variety is one, of course, that's not grown by seed. And with that, you can see that this is a vibrant, beautiful, different colors of foliage. But also, if you think to yourself, that plant there had faced over 35 days of 30-degree weather, and you can see just how big. Coleus, the sun-loving coleus, which is the Dragonheart coleus varieties, are ones that love heat. So they will have, if you have a hot summer with lots of sunshine, these guys here will become mini shrubs in your own garden. And if you're wondering if you can overwinter them, indeed, no problem whatsoever. You can overwinter those guys as a cutting, or even bring that plant indoors and create some more babies during the winter season as well. Now let's talk a little bit about impatiens. So impatiens developed by Claude Hope. Claude Hope was basically a breeder that looked at a Costa Rican coffee plantation and saw at the bottom of the bottom of the coffee plantation, underneath the coffee plants, this wonderful flowering plant, and said, "Hey, what the heck is that?" Well, Claude Hope then started breeding it and became the #1 selling annual for shade, which is the impatient. However, about 6 to 7 years ago, impatiens were suffering from downy mildew. And with that, they were growing very vibrant. And then all of a sudden, you notice their leaves would fall off and they would lose their blooms. And essentially what happened for a few years, impatiens were no longer the go-to shade plant. Well, don't worry. When it comes to breeders, from breeder's bench to gardener's fence, within 5 years, there's a way that they can develop new varieties that are resistant. And this variety here, which is Beacon Impatient, is probably the most downy resistant mildew plant that's out there in terms of one for shade. I've tested Beacon Impatiens for the last 3 seasons in my own home garden. I've done them in white, and I've actually done them in pink, and I've done them also in a little bit of a violet. All 3 colors have been fantastic. So if you're looking for something to have you made in the shade with a carpet of color that's downy mildews resistant, go for Beacon Impatient. There are different varieties that are out there that are also downy mildew resistant, but Beacon is my go-to. Now, if you're thinking about some impatiens that could do well even in a little bit of a sunny section, sun patience. This is Sun Patient Orange, and out of all the varieties that I've tested, Sun Patient Orange is probably the best variety. And what I love about it is you just look at that color, that punch of color that's there. And orange is a really nice color. And this one here in a full sun, as long as you have adequate watering. If you're somewhere that you don't really have a ton of water or not access to water, my go-to plant wouldn't be a impatient or any impatiens by that matter. A reminder that impatiens are pretty much a water stem, and with that, they do need water to be successful overall. Now, if you don't have an access to water, but you want to have great gardens and you want to have great looking gardens with a little bit of deadheading, you can't beat a geranium. Doesn't matter what anybody says. Here, motorcycle driving by outside here. It doesn't matter what anybody says. The reason why geraniums are grandma's favorite is that they are indeed just that. They're a fantastic performing plant in full sun. And calliope, the calliope geraniums are almost a zonal mixed with an ivy geranium that has the ability to grow up and over. So if you're looking for a fantastic geranium in a container, the calliope series of geraniums are my go-to plants. Nice large bloom periods, a little bit of deadheading, a little bit of fertilizer, the right potting soil. Of course, you want to make sure that you use a Miracle Grow potting soil. Boom, and away you go. You're going to have a great looking plant overall. Now, verbena. Verbena was also another plant that over the years would get mildew, powdery mildew. So this is the Lanai series of verbena, and this is at the trials. And this year we had some extreme heat, humidity, and typically what we would be seeing is a lot of powdery mildew on the Lanais, well, on verbenas. Lanai verbena is a fantastic verbena, does well in full sun, comes in an array of different colors, and doesn't get powdery mildew. And with it, I've tested it in a garden setting and as well as in a container. I really like verbenas because of their trailing habit, but as well, just some of their arrays of colors, just how they also have the white center with the pink on the outside, gives you the ability to play with it in many different color combinations in a container. And once again, I always say when it comes to containers, I like to look for a thrill, a fill, and a spill. And if I was to go to a great spiller, it would be Illinois verbena. And if we're going to go to something that's going to give me somewhat of a thrill and or a fill, but more so, I wouldn't use this as a container planting. I would more so use this as a landscape planting. And that would be all the different Mystic Spires salvias. So the salvias themselves, this is an annual salvia that has a blue bloom, blue to purple bloom, and is fantastic. It's a big plant. It'll actually fill to the middle, to the back of the garden, no problem. And the other thing that I've experienced when using the Mystic Spires is the amount of bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds. So if you want to put your community in bloom and you want to fill it with great pollinators and you want to see some wonderful, wonderful bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds, you can use some of the Mystic Spires salvia. And as well, salvias overall, some of the red salvias are fantastic. A little story for you. This year, the Toronto Botanical Gardens, I spent some mornings at the Toronto Botanical Gardens. They had a section where they had salvia planted, and with the salvia being planted there, they had so many hummingbirds coming into the area that each and every day they were having upwards between 20 to 100 different photographers just sitting there waiting for the hummingbirds. And I spent my morning there doing some broadcasts for Breakfast Television Toronto. And as I sat there and a hummingbird would come, all you would hear is all the photographs. So not a good thing during a pandemic. You don't want photographers that close to each other, but a good thing for pollinators. I will tell you, you will never, ever, if you have a sunny location, even with a little bit of dry conditions, and you want to attract pollinators, Mystic go. Something that you can't beat, doesn't matter what anybody says, is the wave petunia. The wave petunia has been making waves in gardens. I think this was its 25th year of celebration of the wave petunia. You know, also known for that pink pot in the beginning, but wave petunia is in a container. That's, if you're wondering what greenhouse that is with that there, that's also another trial that's done here at Sant's greenhouse. So they do another trial. I didn't make it to their trial this year, but I have in years previous. But you can see those wave petunias, they're self-cleaning. They're something that you don't need to deadhead. Very easy plant to grow. Will dramatically grow very quickly as long as you get a little bit of heat overall. And really, I still feel the original series of wave petunia, which was the purple, the first color that came out, is still the best performing variety of wave petunia. And full sun location, fantastic plant. But something basically making the headlines when it comes to annuals is this variety here. Probably the best selling variety that we saw in spring 2020, which is Bee's Knees. Bee's Knees is the brightest, most vibrant yellow petunia series. That's a trailing petunia series that has been around ever. And with Bee's Knees, I was here doing broadcasts at this greenhouse in the retail center during March, during when COVID just started. That's where we stayed away from the studios, and I would just stay in the greenhouse because it's right beside my home. With that, Bee's Knees, I could see when a cameraman would walk in, he would go, "What is that?" My father, that has been growing forever, he said, "Look at how beautiful that is." There is something to be said about when you look at a greenhouse that's over 30,000 square feet and there's one plant that stands out to everybody that walks in, that one there's going to be a showstopper, and that's Bee's Knees. So if you have a color scheme where you're using some yellows, you know, yellows and pinks work, yellows and blues work, but if you're looking for something vibrant in color that can brighten up a dull space and take the eye away, sometimes we're using plants and we're using annuals so that we can draw the eye away from something ugly or block it so that we can make something else look beautiful. Remember, plants are the way, it's our color palette. That's the reason why we're all artists and we're just painting away. You know, another plant I want to draw some attention to when it comes to an annual, and an annual that I think is underutilized in many gardens and even some containers, is pentas. Pentas is really a mid-sized growing plant that grows to about 10, and maybe if you're lucky, you'll get 14 inches of it out at height. But pentas is a beautiful flowering plant that comes in an array of colors that you can see, the whites, reds, and pinks. But pentas for butterflies, pollinators, and hummingbirds, a fantastic flowering annual. This is one that's going to do well, more so to the late spring through the summer months and into fall. Can even take a little bit of a light frost, but if you're looking for a fantastic annual to attract more bees and butterflies, pentas is also my favorite. If you're looking for a great cold tolerant plant, say you live in some of the areas across the country where you just really don't experience the heat, or you get a little bit of an earlier frost, or you even get a late frost in spring, dianthus, of course, is a great, and there are the perennial varieties of dianthus. Dianthus Jolt is one of those varieties that is a little bit more heat tolerant, because often what we find with Dianthus is they'll bloom beautifully in spring, and then as soon as the temperatures go on the rise, they'll sit back in dormancy, really not bloom. You got to give them a little bit of a cutback, and then they'll rebloom again in fall when temperatures get a little bit cooler. But Dianthus Jolt is a beautiful variety with nice and pink in that color that you can see there. That's a little bit more heat tolerant. So if you're looking for a good variety, then look for Dianthus Jolt. Now, osteospermum. Yeah, I was surprised with osteospermum this year. So I went to the trials at Mel Suez, which is Focus Greenhouse Management. And as I was walking the lines, and we're walking through geraniums, we're walking through petunias, we're walking through all the begonias, and I'm thinking to myself, you know, osteos hate the heat. Osteos generally during hot periods of time, it's the osteos that just don't go, they sit in a dormancy. They don't look good. They're just not that plant. I was dramatically surprised this year that one of the best looking plants at the trials was osteos, the osteospermums. And osteospermum voltage, which is a yellow variety of osteospermum, is also a heat tolerant variety that has an exceptionally long bloom period. Of course, reblooming during the growing season, will tolerate frost, almost a temperature that could go down to about -4 to -5. And it's one that's going to perform very well in a container and or a garden. And the upside of that is its heat tolerance. So not only are we looking for plants now that have somewhat of a cold tolerance, we're looking for them for a heat tolerance so that they'll perform for us very well once we plant them in spring, all the way through till the end, to when fall, to when winter sits in. So those are some of my favorite fantastic varieties of annuals. Of course, you can always take a look at some of the different information that I have on Scott's website as well, Scott's Miracle Grow website. You can look at their YouTube videos as well, frankieflowers.com. You can always email me, frankie@frankieflowers.com. A little bit about my family business as well. We are indeed plug growers, and we're also a rooting station for many of the different breeders. So it's our job to actually help smaller greenhouse growers and even municipalities grow great plants. We help everybody from Hamilton here to Aurora to Newmarket. So if you ever need any information, check out BradfordGreenhouses.com as well. So there you go, guys. There's a little bit of my the world of gardening there, and a quick little snippet of some annuals. And Paul Bridges, Paul actually helped me design my landscape. Paul Bridges, I got to give you a little bit of a thumbs up there too.
Well, thanks, Frankie. There's nobody better to take care of plants than you. So thank you for all your information today. You reinvigorated me for the love of annuals. We're going to open up to question and answers now. And at this point, we've got a couple coming in. So I'd just like to remind everybody, if you have any questions, please just hover over the bottom of your screen to find the question and answer segment and bring it in. But Frankie, the first question we've got that came in from Dave Sallows out of Yarmouth. And he's looking for recommendations for annuals that are deer resistant, as that's their biggest challenge in Yarmouth right now.
Yeah, so there are, yeah, deer is a huge issue that's out there. And for deer resistant annuals, I know that salvia tend to do well. So I'll tell you even about my yard. And Paul, you can tell them where my yard was. Right, basically, back onto the Holland Marsh, had a green space behind me. I have deer, I have rabbit. So I'll tell you what I plant, and I've had great success with the deer not touching whatsoever, and rabbits not touching. Had great success with marigolds, of course. I've had great success, and sometimes you'll find rabbits and deer will even snip off marigolds. Salvia, I've had fantastic success with salvia. I've also had great success with some of the different sun patients that do very well as well. And then osteos as well will do pretty good. Pentas, the ones that I feature, they're not as well. And also, just to kind of give you a little bit of I'll give Scott's a little shout out here too as well. Animal Begone is also an ability where you can start to do trained behavior. So with Animal Begone, you can actually spray some of those annuals. And with that, it has Bitrix. So what will happen is the deer will go and touch them, eat them, and then really realize that they have a bad taste. So there's a few application of Animal Begone. Then what'll happen is they'll get trained behavior to go eat somewhere else, and that can help you out as well. But the salvias for me have been fantastic, and deer stay away from them, even rabbits.
All right, that's great. Thanks, Frank. Next question has come in from the prairies, from Denise and Arson. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Denise. How do coleus do in prairie wind plantings if they're planted in mass plantings?
So when it comes to Kong coleus is something that I wouldn't recommend. Concoleus is not going to do well in a windy mass planting situation. The Dragonheart series that I showed you there, the Sun series of Coleus, forgive me, they're very wind tolerant. It's more so the temperature. So as soon as we get a frost, what'll happen is they'll be knocked back quite quickly. So you can have the most vibrant looking gardens. And I know that what happens in the prairies is that you can get frost even into late August. I know that temperatures can drop. So my biggest concern there, yeah, they'll be able to tolerate the wind, but you're not going to get that duration of really big impact that you would want to have that could carry you over into September and even into the months of October. But in terms of Coleus, if you're looking for a good wind tolerant Coleus for mass planting, Dragonheart's an excellent variety.
Fantastic. Thanks again. Any other questions coming in from the audience? While we're here, I know in the meantime, I'd like to really reach out and say, Frankie, thank you for your time. Karen, thanks so much on behalf of Communities in Bloom for Scots, all the help and support over the years. And if I don't hear any other questions coming in, I'd like to remind everyone you do need to sign out and sign in to our 2 o'clock webinar under a separate title. We've got a virtual happy hour, Blooming Happy Hour this afternoon, where we're going to have some stories shared and talk about successes in everyone's home garden. So with that, and not seeing any other questions, Karen, I'll give you the last words today, if you don't mind.
Sure, thanks, Paul. So just wanted to also say thank you to Frank. Appreciate you joining us today and sharing your wisdom and your beautiful photos with us. And thanks for the Scots shout outs. And I hope that everybody has a great symposium. There's lots of great sessions going on, and I hope to see a lot of you there because I know I signed up for most of them. So thanks, Paul, for moderating today and inviting me to participate, and thanks to all of those who have joined us.
Okay, great. Thanks, Karen. Again, Frankie, thank you so much for all your help over the years and so many different garden successes. Karen, your support as well. And we look forward to seeing all of you back at 2 o'clock as you're able. And enjoy the day. Thanks again. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.